Hello viewers, welcome to CodeForAny Medicare App Backends API Node.js inside. Today we need to starting this year the chat messaging API we need to creating here. First of all, we need to create here the chat controllers. We need to develop here the others. We need to go here and to open this here the finders. And we need to create here the duplicates. Now we need to copy this file and create here the new file and to give this name here chat message controller dot js like set here, and now need to paste these codes and we need to remove this here the unused codes we need to remove here. First of all, need to remove this here the test login API also remove here like this. Remove this here the user data no needs, need to clean. Also admin login no needs. Remove here the CT related all API. We needs here the add issue because we need to use this here the multi-parts because we need to either possible to text message, add image and any files we need to sending. That's why need to need this here the upload codes needs here. That's why need to only stay here the add API. Need to copy and paste, need to use here like here. We need to remove not matters, we need to again write these functions and explain explain in details. And also need this here the check access tokens here the required because this is the access token API we need to use here. Now first of all we need to declare this here the DB variables, then helper variables, multi-parts variables and file variables are the declaring these files, and also need to give this here the image, and inside we need to creating this here the public in img folders, and to create here the new folders we need to give this here the name as a chat like here, and chat messages like this we need to setting here. Now we need to creating here the multi-parts API. First of all we need to create here the API app dot, need to write down here the post methods, we need to calls slash app API slash app slash chat message like here. And now we need to get this here the two callback parameters, request and response, and function operators we need to call here. Now we need to declare this here the multi-party variables need to declare. First of all need to write down here the form is equal to new multi-part dot form methods we need to write down here, and creating this here the form variables. Now use this here the form variables dots, we need to parse functions we need to call here. Inside we need to give this here the request object, and then to give this here the returns three parameters. First one is errors, second one is the request body means request objects, and here third parameters inside get this here the all uploaded files like here, and to write down this here. Then after you need to get here the files and to pass these forms, and to get here the callback inside we need to check this here these access tokens are valid or not. We need to check here, if not valid then to automatically return this here the response and close these functions. Now need to write down here check tokens, pass this here the request dot header, so needs here the write down here header like here. So need to pass this here the headers as compulsory. Then after we need to write down here the response objects, and we need to return this here the tokens users. So need to return this here the token user data, need to retrieve here like here, and also make sure so we need to like here getting, and this is the valid here. Now we need to check this here the required parameters needs here, to write down here helper dot check valid parameters methods need to call this here. First parameters inside parts is here the response. Then after need to give this here the request object. Then after needs check here the required key. Which key are needs? First of all need to needs here the receiver ID. Which users need to send this message. That's why into receiver ID need to told this here. This message, this user ID need to received. Need to write down here and to underscore ID to check here the spelling, no typo. Now we need to another parameters message inside pass this here the text. If here's message type also need to check needs here because need to sometimes user pass here the files, image, video like this something. So need to put inside the chat message. That's why to need this here the message types are the required save file types. Then to save this here the file path inside the message and also set here the types. If one here the text message, if two here the files path need to store inside the database dot socket id. Also we need to needs here and connect this. Like need to configurations are the needs here and return this here the callback. Now these configurations are done for the validates here the parameters are the required. So we need to checking here done. Now we need to update this here this current user sockets ID. We need to updates inside the our local memory inside. We need to save in variables USD underscores. We need to give this here the user object dot user ID. We need to write down here and we need to update this here the pass this here socket underscore id and new socket id need to update inside the memory and variables. Now like this save and updating this here. Now I need to creating here the created dates also need to needs here. So need to write down here the where created date is equal to need to call this here the helper dot need to write down here the server ddmmyy formats. So need to need this here and to set here. Now write down here the where message is equal to need to save this here the request object dot message need to write down here zero value because this is the multipart API form data multiparts API. Now we need to check here the conditions. If request message type message underscore type and index of zero value equal to 2 double quotes like this here. If here the this value and now need to check here if files dot image is found, then means need to file this here the gets if else parts. If not passing here the type 2 sets and not image gets parameters, this means here the missing parameters dot JSONs need to call this here the returns. Write down here the status, set here the 0 and we need to return this here the message is equal to need to write down here the colons, need to set here the missing file upload like here returning this here the message. Now need to write down here the where and first of all need to find out here the file extensions. So to need this here now need to go inside the logins and to find out here the any file related codes need to copy here and use these functions inside the chat message. Need to paste this here and now we also need to change this here chat folders. Need to create here and to put this here and to over this here the brackets like here and we need to save and remove this here the response like here. And now we need to save this here the if here the files, then we need to change this here the message is equal to need to give this here the file names like here and to message inside need to set here the file paths, we need to save server path. Like here, the configurations are the needs here's and to save this here's. Now save this here's. Like here, the creatings are the done, and if you get here the errors, then to call this here function terminates and to return this here the response. And executions are the stops here is most important parts. Now, if everything is okay, we need to get this here the image, otherwise the message types send. Then to save inside the database, we need to write down here. So we need to call this here the db dot query, and we need to write down here the insert into, and we need to write down here the chat message dot detail. Need to write down here the query. We need to open this here the database to directly get this here the query is good. Now this is the Medicare app, and we need to select this here the chat message details tables. Go inside the SQLs. Need to write down here the insert query. Need to remove this here the chat ID. Also need to remove this here the created dates and modified dates. No needs. Need to clean here, and also need this here the remove here the status. And now need to count this here the value 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now need to give this here the pi question mark inside these columns. With this here the space, easy to count of the question mark is good. Now need to cut this query, and we need to put here this query. Easy to create like this here the query. No need to manually write and forgetting here the typo. This is the matter best way to need to get this here the creating here the insert query. Like here, we need to write down here and to set this here and this data. Now need to save here, and we need to also need this here the another query. We need to write down here and to receiver's ID data informations also need this here. That's why I need to write down here the another select query, and to receiver user info need to getting here like this here the image name and user IDs. We need to needs here. That's why I need to creating here the another select query. Need to go inside the MySQL tables. Here, go inside the here the tables. Okay, user details. Now SQL query, select query. You need to need this here the name, first names, middle name, last names. No needs here the mobile numbers. Like this informations, no needs, only user related informations need to needs here. That's why I need to putting here. Need to cut this here the experience. No needs this latitude, longitude, push tokens. We need to remove this all things here, and need to write down here the image columns now, and we need to set here user ID, cut here this query, and we need to put here the select query like here, and question mark like this here the write down here this here. And now we need to bind here the image with here the image path. We need to set this here. Now need to write down here case conditions, if case when, and to write down here image is equal to not equal to blank, single quotes is good because we need to use this here the double quotes. That's why I need to use this here the single quote. And if now check like this here, then use this here the concat like here brackets, write down here the single quote and create here double quotes. Thus need to write down here helper dots. We need to call this here the image path to call this here the functions and to get this here the path. After the over this here the brackets inside we need to pass this here the image here, and we need to creating here the else part. And like here, so need to write down here as you need to give this here the alias name as a, again so need to set this here the image we need to set here. Also message also need this here the message key blank we need to need here as need to set here message because we need to list inside we need to give this here the message also need to needs here the message, and we need to give this here the message types also parameters we need to need this here set here the one, as we need to column names need to give this here the message types custom types need columns need to declare inside this here the user details, like here the configures and to pass this here the value need to set here and to write down here the semicolons, and now pass this here the to query value. First query inside the pass this here the user object dot user id as a sender id need to pass here. Then after the request object dot receiver id we need to pass here like here. Then after so need to pass this here the another for the message we need to need this here the parameters set here the request objects need to use this inside we need to save this here the this variables need to use this here need to pass here the message. Then after request type object message types also need to needs set here 0 like here, and socket id not passed we need to check here the another parameters of the last. Receiver dates also no needs need to receiver after the receive need to put here temporary not use this here these columns that's why I need to removing here, and also need to remove here the one question mark like here. Now like this saves and to set this here this data. Then after we need to need this here the user id also need to pass here again so need to copy here second query user id need to given this here like here, and give this here the comma, remove here the comma like here, and now need to return this here the errors and result callbacks so need to returning this here like here. Now check here if gets any error, then to call this here the helper dot throw errors htmls errors and result response, return these functions and terminate this here the calls of the servers like we need to write down here. Then after so we need to getting this here the message if result get here the 0 means inserted done, else parts we need to else response need to write down here the response dot json, call this here the status set here the 0, and we need to write down here the message is equal to msg fail we need to call this here if here the fail. Now here successfully get this here the info, then to calling this here first of all need to creating here the data payload data message into where data message is equal to creates here the object. Inside we need to write down here the chat underscore id need to database columns need to go get this here the result 0 index of value, and we need to get this here the insert id like here. Then after we need to set here the sender underscore id is equal to pass this here the object, give this here the user id need to pass here. Then after need to need this here the parsing here the receiver id we need to also pass here need to copy here, and we need to paste this here colons need to use this here the parse int because need to pass here the integer value request object dots index of 0 value like here, same as message type again, so need to copy this here and to change this here the column names. Now need to pass here the message like here, and we need to set this here data, pass here the message value. Now we need to set here the status, set here 0 means here the sender, and maybe status is not needed, so need to remove here. Now created dates also needs here because we need to showing here the dates, created date. Need to use this here, the helpers need to check here function available so or not, so need to check here, convert here the server date and times. Maybe not right here the convert to server name times, we need to not here the functions, need to create here the ISO date. Now we need to copy any one functions related to date, copy here, paste this here, need to write down here the function name ISO date, and we need to pass here the date like here. Call this here the moment, to check here the moment. So ellipse direct, check here, here this moment dot pz time zones, and we need to pass this here the date. Then after need to give this here the format, need to call here this formats, we need to put here. Then after set here the time zone name, and to call this as string, call like here the functions, and to save this here, use these functions for converting helper dot ISO date, and we need to pass this here the created date, need to pass here this create date, need to use this here like here, and to creating this here the data message functions are the done right down here. Now return this here the response these functions, set here the status, need to write down here status 1. Then after need to pass this here the payload, we need to return this here the payload inside the data message, and message also need to give this here MSG success like here. Now here the most important parts, receiver users need to sending here the sockets, so need to call here, need this here the identify here first of all to find out here the current user receiver user sockets. Then inside we need to call this here getting the sockets, inside we need to call this here the client event, we need to fire here. Now need to how to get this here the receiver sockets, need to write down here the receiver sockets, need to receiver socket, like declares here the variables, you need to get this use this here the socket list array, you need to use, and you need to find out here the user underscore request dot object receiver id index of 0 value, we need to get here for the this sockets. If we need to check here conditions, request socket and need to required is socket.socket io.socket dots sockets. Again, so need to use this here the sockets keyword two times. New syntax like this here, the write down here, and get functions. We need to calls. Need to give this here the socket ID. Use this here socket ID. Need to pass. If you get here, then to get inside the if condition, need to bounce inside the socket. Now again, so need to write down here these methods. Need to copy here these variables. Need to give this here. Now need to call here the emit methods. We need to calls. Give this here the socket event name. So need to set here the chat message like here, and we need to pass this here the data. Need to use here copy this data, paste this here for these payloads inside. Need to set here the array. Need to data message like here passing. Then observe also need to pass this here the which user information also need to pass which user we need to sending this message. Need to pass this here for the informations, because chat message is opening this here the chat window. If not opening here the chat window, that's only to chat message list inside not available this user informations. If you not between here the before any chat message, we need to calling. That's why we need to use this here the user info. We need to we need to pass here request once, and we need to index of 0 value. We need to set here first of all. We need to check this here the length more than 0. Then we need to call here this value else parts. We need to blank objects. We need to call here like, and we need to print here the helper dot dlogs, and need to print here the debug purpose receiver socket send emit methods. We need to fire emit success like here's print here's else parts not found here the receiver socket like this error logs. We need to print here for the debug purpose receiver socket client not found like here's. Now need to save this years and to creating like this methods for the sending here the message with real times, and receiver also need to receive these sockets these names to receive socket message inside emit methods. So inside we need to receiving this here the this payload data. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new user, so please subscribe my channels and press the notification bell icon. You can get every new video notifications and awesome content. If you have any questions, so please write down the comment sections. I will help you and sort out your issue. Everyone have a nice day. Goodbye and take care.